I'm actually restoring this jointer here that a good friend of mine gave to me. It was sitting around in his workspace and he was trying to clear out that workspace and move. According to him, it was actually never used, not even once. It was owned by his father, and it's just sat for many, many, many years and collected rust. And unfortunately, I've already done a lot of the work here in cleaning up and leveling the table. I then suddenly realized, hey, I should be filming this. So I'm gonna start filming it now, but just to show you how this started out. I still have to clean up this fence. I haven't touched this yet. And so this whole surface and everything else started out like this. But I'm gonna walk you through what I did up to this point, and then I'm just gonna keep on doing it until it's done. So I started out by just wiping down the whole thing with mineral spirits, and really that is just because there was a lot of dust and surface rust that I could get off quickly and easily by wiping it down with mineral spirits, and that way I can just see everything more clearly before I begin working, so I know what I'm dealing with. Then after that, it was really just a process of alternating between calcium lime rust remover, which is a pretty common product you can pick up at, well, anywhere really, hardware stores, grocery stores, and people use it on toilets and things like that a lot, bathtubs. So I would drizzle the CLR onto the surface just a little bit. First I'd spread it around a little bit with the pad so it gets everywhere, let it sit for about 30 seconds, and then I'd start just working it in, and then I'd remove it. You want to get that CLR off of there, and I'd just wipe it off with a cloth. But this was so far gone that the rust actually deformed the table in a way where there's these low spots, and that's what you're seeing here where these dark spots are. Big one right here, one here, and a little bit back here. So what I started doing, and what I'm continuing to do right now, is level this table with a flat beam and 80 grit sandpaper. So this is the same kind of beam that you might use for leveling your fingerboard. And I'm just going back and forth like this. And then I'll even alternate that with this swirling motion. You can even cut across like this. I like to alternate the pattern. I think it helps to avoid leveling too much in one area or the other if you just kind of always move that pattern around. And actually the guard here can just be locked off like this with a clamp or something like that. You could also remove it, but there's reasons why I'm not doing that, which is basically that there's a lot of rusty pieces down there, and I kind of don't want to move those things around because I'm a little worried that I won't be able to get them back into place if I take this out. So I'm just going to leave it on. It functions properly, it moves freely. Don't want to mess with it. So here, I'll show you what I mean. If I take, I'm going to say, I think we're at 3/1000ths of an inch. And I place my straight edge there, and you can see I'm hitting over there, but where this dark spot is, that goes right under, and I'm still hitting over here. On this side, you can see I can get in over there at the end, again where that dark spot is. And, well, this one's pretty close. I can't, this is probably 2/1000ths of an inch, because I can't get the 3 in this area. Alright, so here's where I'm at, leveling. This is probably the bulk of where most of my time will be spent, just leveling this table. It's important to note that I'm leveling the infeed table and the outfeed table separately, rather than leveling them together. It's true that in the end, the infeed table and the outfeed table need to be coplanar to each other, but right now that is not the purpose of leveling. Later on, I will adjust the tilt of the infeed table in order to make sure that the two tables are coplanar to each other. Okay, and so I am actually going to stop right here. I have it most of the way level. Obviously, you can still see the dark spots where some of these low spots still exist, but they're down to about 0.02 of an inch at the worst, deepest points. And the biggest thing is that these spots are now pushed to the middle, meaning there's no area. Before, there was a low point that spanned the whole width of it, which to me was more problematic when you're feeding things across than just an isolated spot in the center here and right up here and back here. These dark spots don't run all the way across. So honestly, I'm not worried about them anymore. So now I can turn my attention to cleaning up and leveling the fence, which for a jointer is equally as important as getting those tables flat. I need that fence to be flat so that can be set square to the table. So once again, I'm using mineral spirits just to wipe it down and clean it up a little bit so I can remove some of the surface rust and some of the dust and just get a better look at what I'm dealing with here. Okay, now that I can see what I'm doing, I'm going to remove some of these extra parts here that will only get in the way during the fence leveling process. So I begin like I began with the table by rubbing in rust remover with a Scotch-Brite pad. However, in this case, because earlier today I was at a woodcraft store and saw this product, here I'm using rust-free rust and stain remover, only because I wanted to see if it would work a little faster or easier than the CLR. And I actually found it to work just as well as the CLR, but not any better. So it didn't really justify the extra cost. Not really a rave review here, I guess. But anyway, it gets the job done. Checking it again with the straight edge and some feeler gauges, I find that we have low spots, not surprisingly, where the rust has deformed the fence. So once again, I begin the heavy work of sanding out these low spots using 80 grit sandpaper on the flat sanding beam. Okay, so the fence is as good as I want to get it. Once again, there are still these low spots you can see right here, here, and here, and a little bit up here in the very corner. But again, they're relatively small, and as far as the depth of them, they're less than 0.02 of an inch. So I feel pretty good about that. And so here I have a little tub of simple green. That's this stuff right here. And I have some of the various screws and bits of hardware that I thought were exceptionally rusty and just in bad shape. And what I'm going to do is just drop these in here for a couple minutes, and then I'm going to pull them out and scrub them with a toothbrush. Now you could, I'd imagine, just use that CLR remover or the other more expensive rust remover product that I was using there. But it's very caustic stuff, and with how, even with gloves on, pulling these out and working so closely with these tiny little pieces, I'd imagine would be just too much of a mess on my hands. The gloves would tear and all that stuff. And I'm happy just using, even if it's not quite as much of a rust removal agent, I'm happy with just using simple green because it makes my hands happy. Lastly, I dry off the hardware and lightly coat it with oil. So now moving on to the cutter head itself, I'm spraying it with pitch remover. This particular bottle is called Blade and Bit, and it's something else I picked up at the Woodcraft store today. And it seemed to clean it up pretty well. Obviously, I've removed the blades from the cutter head before starting this. And I'm rotating the cutter head, by the way, by simply pulling on the pulley. Being careful, of course, not to catch or pinch my fingers in the process here. Now, if this machine was never actually used, as my friend suggests, then you might think the pitch remover is not really necessary. Well, it's pretty dirty in here, so I'm going to clean it up with it anyway. And perhaps this machine was actually used a few times. It's hard to say. Either way, it's not going to hurt to use the pitch remover. Now, after I use the pitch remover, I follow this up, of course, with some oil, just to prevent new rust from forming. Okay, so now that I've done most of the work, cleaned up the major surfaces on the fence and on the table here, I'm going to set up the table, which is just a normal operation you would do for any jointer. Could be a brand new jointer. It's just a part of the initial setup process. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that the infeed table, that's this portion here, and the outfeed table are coplanar to each other, which simply means that, here I'll try and demonstrate what coplanar means. So we want them to be parallel. They can be a little high or low from each other, but the surfaces should be parallel. What we don't want is one to be tipped one way or the other, twisted in regard to the other plane, and we don't want it to be ramped like you see here in regard to the other plane. We want the two planes of the infeed table and the outfeed table to be parallel. And the way we accomplish this is there are 4 screws, studs, on each corner of the infeed table, and we're going to raise and lower those studs as necessary to get this whole thing to be coplanar to the outfeed table. So if this end here is dropped down a little bit, I will turn that stud up to bring that into alignment. And as always, I can check things with feeler gauges here. I'm just using the smallest feeler gauge in the set, which is 1.5 thousandths of an inch. And so when I reference the straight edge on the outfeed table, I should then see a consistent gap from one end to the other on the infeed table. And if I don't see that, then the infeed table is tipped or twisted in some way, and I need to correct that. So this side needs to go down a little bit. This has more space. I can just see, even without the feeler gauge, more space than back there. And this looks pretty even all the way across. Adjusting the studs is a bit of a tug of war. You adjust one stud on one end and it will affect the other stud on the opposing side ever so slightly. And so you just have to go back and forth to all these studs until they're just perfectly in line. And finally, I've purchased some brand new blades for this jointer because the old blades, well, they're just very old. They don't really show any signs of use, but they have some rust on them, and I figured this is really a situation where new blades are warranted. The installation process of these blades is a bit tricky and really could be its own video in and of itself, which I'm not going to get into right now, except to say that you need a special, or maybe not need, it would help you to have a special tool called a jointer pal, which helps
magnetically hold the blades in place while you lock them down. Also, a magnetic base with a dial caliper is really useful for finding top dead center of the cutter head, which allows you to accurately set the blade heights so they're all the same. So that's it for now. In the next episode, I will be jointing some neck blanks. And so to see this machine run, you'll have to stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video every Friday. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.